very informal. This is not a dry BBC or 60 Minutes kind of news reporting. And we are live. Welcome everybody who hasn't shown up yet. If you come in and catch the replay, I am your host, RJ Carter, managing editor here at criticalblast.com, author of The Destroyer Bully Pulpit, Continental Divide, and Monumental Terror. And I am joined here tonight by the good gentleman from Archetype Comics. And there are many ways of saying that. So if it's Archetype where some people are, please correct me. That's what I like to hear, Archetype. Nicholas and Joe, guys, why don't you introduce yourselves and what your roles are at your company?
Let's see. I'm the owner, operator, editor, money supplier, and slave driver. Joe is the slave. He writes.
My name is J.E. McKeever. You can call me Joe. It's all good. I am the intellectual and emotional heart of Archetype Comics. The creative, the Kirby to Nicholas's Stan. If ever we could only live in their shadow.
Whoa.
I am the head writer, as if that matters when you're also often the only writer. And
my other job also includes inflating his ego a bit.
Yeah. And I am also office troll.
Needs one.
I live under a desk.
So when you say you're office troll, you don't want. So, how long have you guys been doing comic books?
How long ago did we start on Mars Project, Joe? 5-6 years ago, I think it was, something like. Probably more.
Well, I believe the story was going to come up at some point, so maybe it's best to start with the story, if you don't mind story time with Uncle Joe.
Sure. Why don't you tell them the funny story about how we got started in comics?
Very good. So many moons ago, I was in college, experiencing the collegian experience, and Nicholas was a friend of mine, and we're all online. And I am a comic reader. Nicholas was a comic reader, but not as much of a comic reader. And I would get into my salty, curmudgeonly moods and complain about things in comics. Not like it's new and therefore it sucks, but the trends. I was watching the trends and I wasn't liking them as a consumer. And I would get really upset because there is this obfuscation or this lack of transparency about how you get into the business. As consumers, as fans, as kids, we're all like, yeah, I want to go do this. It's going to be great. And then you become an adult and you try to figure out how is this done. And it instantly becomes, because it's a business, it becomes very complicated and convoluted. And so Nicholas and I would have the regular argument, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? Wouldn't it be cool if we did this? We could do not necessarily better, but we could do the kinds of comics that we want to read, which everybody else wants to read, because of course they want to read them. And Nicholas, being, Irish and very polite, eventually said, well, look, Joe, if this is what you care about, why don't you do it? And I said, well, maybe I will. And so a script was written, and it's like, well, I wrote a script now. What are you going to do about it? And he's like, well, I guess I'll get an artist. And history were made.
Oh, no, we've lost our friend.
Oh, God.
I think we're the only ones here now.
Oh, no.
I think we can hijack the show.
Yeah, quick, steal the stuff.
Get the crowbar.
Quickly, steal things before anyone notices.
Oh, dear.
Someone named Bianca Fights Zombies has said, aloha, y'all. Yes, in the live comments. Aloha.
Hello.
Hi. We're going to be friendly.
Yeah, we are your new benevolent overlords. This stream is now ours. I'm happy to announce that we are taking over Critical Blast Studios. we are absorbing them into our corporate entity.
Yes, it is now a rogue free state of Archetype City.
I should have sent him a quick Twitter message and see if we can figure out what's happened.
Oh, here we go.
He has returned.
Welcome, peasant, to our stream. We have seized the means of production.
Somebody take it, please.
Yeah. Someone take the responsibility.
I tell you what, it's been happening to everybody today.
Really? Wonderful.
Even Ethan Van Sciver's been cutting out of his own streams.
Oh, gosh. Joe left out the part where I got fed up about him complaining and said, if you're so damn good at writing, why don't you make a bloody comic and we'll see if it's any good.
No, I totally mentioned it.
You did, but you put it in much nicer language, whereas I was much more like, okay, if I say this, maybe he'll shut up. Well, unfortunately for me, he didn't. And then he wrote a script, and then he called my bluff. And then I talked to family members, and then we said, okay, we will try this for a year or two and see if we can make something of it. We pushed our comic out there for a year and a bit. We were awful at marketing ourselves, but, we tried and failed, and then we stepped back and said, okay, what can we do instead? Joe went off and did his thing for a while. I went off, and since I had all the artists I was working with, I said, hey, guys, how about if I act as your link to Western audiences? So I would be around to deal with the customers. They would get their work. I would get a small piece for referring customers to them. And ever since then, we've kind of been pecking away, trying to get something going again. Last year, we really wanted to get back into this, and then everything kind of fell apart for a while. We had to shelve it again at the last minute. And then this year, we're kind of like, okay, let's get back into this. Let's push this out a bit. And I mean, this all started when I saw that tweet from Ethan, and I was like, yeah, and how do we get into this stuff? Because I'm, grumbly and annoyed at how difficult it has been for us to make headway into this. And then suddenly everyone was like, well, you got to do this and talk to these people. And I'm like, where were these people last year? Or 3 years ago, for that matter? And of course, this is all
the last 2 years. I'll tell you, the last 2 years have been a renaissance. And it's all because of the crowdfunding surge. 3 years ago, there was crowdfunding, but it wasn't quite anywhere near as what it is now. I crowdfunded some comics, not published them. I was on the purchasing end 4 years ago. I think there was a book out called Titan, and I can't even recall the author's name. But I thought, I was 20 bucks for $20 for a comic book, and I get a signed card, and I get a little poster. That's kind of a neat deal. And the money was going to cancer. Not making some, but trying to cure it, I believe. That was kind of cool. But I don't think it was until Richard Meyer made waves and basically went through Zach, and was told pretty much the same thing. If you're salty about not being able to get published, why don't you just go do your own damn comic book? Which he went and did. And then all of a sudden, everyone was like, holy crap, this is a thing. We can do this.
Well, we have to give some credit to our artist who we haven't mentioned yet. Nicholas, if you recall his name, because I did not.
Which one?
The one who helped us on the Executioner specifically.
That was a really nice guy who lived down in Venezuela, but I never actually got his name because I hired him through a freelance company that I was working with at the time.
Well,
we're doing Fiverr comic books now.
I don't know. I don't know if it was him, but there was one gentleman who was in, I want to say, the Middle East or in Southeast Asia, and is a Muslim, and that's fine. There's nothing.
Oh, you're talking about Riff.
Yeah, Riff.
Yeah, he's our main guy. He wasn't in that comic, but he did some work towards the end of it. He's done some work on our new stuff as well. He's done all the roughs for it.
The thing is that he's in the media as far as the for commission market of the internet, and Ramadan came around. He's like, I'm sorry, guys, there's certain work I can't work on because it's the holiday. And we were kicking around the executioner, and we said, we've paid for your time. We'd love to continue paying for your time. We would love it if maybe, could you work on this? Could you work on some of this? And he was like, oh, I would love to work on something that is, publicly viewable for a wider audience and lets me really practice my chops and do like the human form and action and explosions. And it's like, done.
Yeah, that's what it came down to, because we were doing a lot of commission work at the time, and not all of it was suitable for work during what was a religious festival for his group over there. And I said, well, look, we've got you on retainer anyway. Why don't you do the script we have kicking around that we have been working on? And that's where we got the roughs from. And after we had the roughs for the execution, we were like, hey, this is actually looking even better on paper than we had thought, because originally we had written it as just a kind of exercise in this is how we write a comic. Because the Executioner started life really as a kind of throwaway. We were like, let's get some concepts out there. And at the time, I mean, I'm going to segue out into wider philosophical discussion for a moment, but at the time we were dealing with a lot of stuff like the Bill Cosby stuff, the Jimmy Savile stuff, the Rolf Harris stuff, a lot of stuff where people who were supposed to be icons in the public were being revealed to be less than savory characters, or in some particular cases, absolutely vile monsters. And the Executioner came about because I basically woke up one day and I said to Joe, what would we do if, like, Wonder Woman was a rapist who was into some really nasty stuff? And we were like, okay, well, maybe we have this character whose purpose is to effectively regulate the heroes and villains. They themselves are not involved in the traditional back and forth of heroes and villains and arching one another and, the usual sort of comic book style hero stuff that we see, but instead is there to make sure that when people step outside the line, when someone really does develop a doomsday weapon, that such a person quietly goes away and is never heard from ever again. And the Executioner was effectively an introduction to that character. That's kind of where we got started with it all.
To make some comparisons, because I know that many a comic fan, many a media fan will make these comparisons, and they're not wrong. Let's put it to bed by saying they're not wrong. Yeah, sure, there's some similarity to Batman, to the Shadow, to Moon Knight, or the Phantom, for people that are old and musty like myself. But also, anybody who's watching The Boys on Amazon.
Don't talk to me about that.
Just accept it exists, okay?
I know.
That is trying to do the same sort of thing where normals deal with supers in a darker world. But I have a love-hate relationship with Garth Ennis's specific kind of black comedy. His unique take on things is not my take, right? So I was also tickled with the idea of, like, what if the person who is the check against unrestrained power is like Agent 47? Instead of a bunch of, like, guys who are just kind of doing a thing because you got to do the right thing, or a bunch of spooks in the government. It's like, no, this is both a moral extremist who is outside officialdom and therefore a criminal, and yet also is the kind of person that you might honestly want at your defense, at your beck and call when things are in the extreme, because they are not bound by the one rule code or other limitations, and they're not a madman like the Punisher. And believe you me, I love me some Punisher. The Executioner's thing is the hero or the villain or what have you is more akin to a puzzle. It's not, oh no, they have to find a way to fight Superman and there's in Q Super Battle. It's, one kryptonite bullet, one shot, one position, many months of study, the critical infiltration, the getting close, the understanding what's really going on about your target, and then juxtaposed by the wider world hunting for the executioner, this dangerous criminal that you really shouldn't be cheering for because they're straight up a criminal. They do bad things. They're not a heroic sociopath or a noble vigilante.
I love the bad guy, good guys, though. I mean, one of my favorite characters that nobody's ever heard of in comics, I'm going to say, early 90s, was Twister. And Twister was a serial killer. Now, what made him a serial killer was that his type was he killed serial killers. That was who he hunted. That was all he ever killed was serial killers.
Back before it was cool.
Way before Dexter. And, way before Kick-Ass came out, my first published short story was The Secret Origin of Jerry, which was just a guy who finally said, why haven't we got somebody dressing up and doing this yet? We always emulate science fiction reality, and puts together a costume and goes out to fight crime and gets shot at the first 7-Eleven holdup he tries to stop and dies. But the ideas recycle. They come around, and even today, I was telling Nicholas when we were in the green room, I had to deal with 4 different characters named Punchline today, and 2 of them are mob assassin clown themed motif killers. And they're all coexisting at 4 different companies right now. So there's consternation going on.
Well, that was the other thing was before we ever put down word 1, before we actually got into the nitty gritty of a script to be built, there was this conversation about, well, what is missing? What is that thing that is making, me mostly, but also generating this debate? What is it that is making the reader upset, such that you have all these YouTube conversations and blogs and the like just exploding in outrage for or about or around or involved in various things going on? And I reason that it is the lack of simple stories well told. Not that they have to be simple-minded. They don't have to be dumb, but just, I'm a consumer. I want to pick up a book. I want to open that book. I want to read that story, coming away with a good feeling about what I just read. I want to see bad guys getting shot at or beaten or defeated or captured or getting away with it. And I want to see good guys who are good, even if they are troubled, struggling. I want to see a world that is hopefully better than the one we live in. Or if it's worse, at least the people in it are trying to be good in a bad place, and just to enjoy what I'm reading. It doesn't even have to not be part of a extended narrative. It could be part of an arc. Because I never had money for a whole run of comics. I never had a subscription for a comic. I would pick up Catch as Catch Can where I could. So, there I am, mid-90s, picking up a Spider-Man, and I'd get 3 issues out of a 5-issue set for the Goblin War with Hobgoblin and Green Goblin and love it, but not know what started it or how it finished.
Yep. Gone are the days. I'm older than both of you guys, probably. I'm 52.
Yep.
Okay. And when I bought comics, well, first of all, you couldn't buy comics when I was a kid. I grew up in the town where every comic book in the world was printed, Sparta, Illinois, before they all got farmed out to Canada and China and all that. I mean, Marvel, DC, PC, AC, they were all right there in Sparta. And the people who worked there brought comics home from the overruns, and you just went to yard sales and you bought comic books. But you picked up a book and you started reading the story, and at the end of the book, you finished the story. If it was 2-issue story, that was a big deal. And if it was 3 issues, well, that was the summer Justice League, Justice Society crossover event that was always a huge thing. But now, you get 5-6 issue story arcs, and you have to hunt them down to sit down and enjoy the whole thing. Now it's down to you pick up the part 1 of a story arc, and it's Batman staring out the window at the rain, and you come back 6 months later, and he's like, finally the rain stopped. I can go outside. Oh damn, the sidewalk's wet.
I don't even mind the long-running story forms. I honestly don't, from like a cognitive perspective. I'm just saying that individual story, if it is part of a wider narrative, still needs to be a solid story.
Yeah, it can't stand under its own weight. I mean, I think most of us who have read Western comics at this point have come to the sad realization that all these crossovers and serializations are just a really cheap way to try and inflate their numbers. It's like when on TV, Batwoman is doing badly, they cross it over with The Flash, and they can say, look, our numbers went up briefly for about 5 minutes. And it's the same with comics. They're trying to prop up things that aren't very interesting, unfortunately. And the one thing we wanted to do with ours is every book we put out is self-contained. So beginning, middle, and end in each book. And then each book itself can be interlinked such that you can read all of them to get a nice broad overview of the entire world setting. Or you could just read any one of them just to have a nice story.
The other thing is that while words are hard sometimes. The writer says words be hard. While an individual story might be very, very qualitative in the modern comic realm, they are not sometimes like oriented in action. They're not couched in the old dance routine. So like you'll have a Spider-Man comic. I read one recently where Peter Parker is crashing on somebody's couch because he's not married anymore and he's not dating the Black Cat anymore, and he's literally just a loser. They have denigrated him to the extreme, and if he is in the suit at all, it's to web swing someplace and think about it, and think about what he's doing. And it's like, no, if you're going to have him in the toga, he got to be punching a guy. There's got to be a bank robbery. There's got to be a mugging. There's got to be a something. You have to remind us this is an action comic.
Yeah, they're so introspective. It's kind of like 20 pages of navel-gazing interspersed between advertising for poster supplies.
That was it. That was it. What I was going to say as well is, while comics have always been an industrial process, because it's an assembly line, I'm not going to deny it, it has become marketed in an industrial fashion rather than an artisanal one. It's not presented any longer as like the team of creatives, these geniuses who have gathered from darkened holes and, in their wizard robes, and they have crafted from the ether the comic, right? Because it's now, 3 to 6 months set events. This is your first quarter event. This is your second quarter event. This is your third quarter event. Fourth quarter event's going to wrap it up or lead into the next year's set of events.
That's it. Yeah, it's exactly how they market it. They basically don't sell comic books anymore. They sell graphic novels by the chapter.
Right. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with a graphic novel, but this hurts because your business model, because rather than having regular business where I buy off the newsstand, and I'm like, if we could somehow transpose time and get Jim Shooter in here, he would go on about how we shouldn't be in comic stores. We should be on newsstands, and we've ruined the business. But it's only worth it to buy the trade paperback now. Get the collected, right. And when it's all done, because you can't swing the individual thing, especially if it's spread out across multiple comics that you can only afford one.
I hear that. Getting back to the Punisher.
See?
Okay. The Executioner, which, by the way, was a Don Pendleton book series upon which the Punisher was based. So I know where I was going with that. But getting back to the Executioner. Yes.
The cycle continues.
Reading some of the advance art, right there at the beginning, I'm reading the dialogue, and it says that the executioner has been at large for 90 plus years.
Yep. Yep. Um, it's a little confusing at first. We're basically pulling a Batman Beyond. The Executioner as a symbol has existed in this setting since superheroes were basically introduced roughly around World War One-ish. And there was an Executioner then. And there is still an Executioner now. And we're following the modern-day Executioner, who is the protege of the former Executioner from the early 20th century, who acts as her mentor and her guide. So they effectively act as a duo, like Terry and Bruce did in Batman Beyond.
You also have some overtones of sorry.
You dropped a pronoun there, so now we know that the executioner is a her.
Yes, which really doesn't matter because we wrote it gender neutral initially, much like Ripley in Aliens. But because of where the story went and because of how we developed it, it was like, oh, we kind of need to make this person female. So it was like, yep, okay, that's fine.
So two things real quick. One was it also has elements of the Phantom, how the Phantom is an inheritor because the original Kit Walker from the comics was like the 22nd Phantom, not the first. And it has elements of usual comicdom in the sense of people live a little longer and there's super science for life extension, and just crediting that, if you were a superhero during the 20s and 30s, maybe you live longer in general. But
he survived the super battles.
Yeah. The other thing being that if you actually look at the art, you will note that the Executioner is a male suit. Right?
Yeah, it's a very androgynous suit. It's designed that way.
Yeah, quite frankly, we should credit to the notion that it's actually a joke in one of my favorite movies. If you're wearing a bulletproof vest, your Wonder Bra is wasted. So you would never know under the suit with the voice altering and the various tricks that the Executioner isn't a male. And society would assume such. And frankly, you kind of should, not because a superhero can't be a woman, but rather that you're fighting the hero, not the hero's gender, not their ethnicity, not their politics, unless their politics are somehow incumbent on the battle and it's a war of ideals, very,
Captain
Rise
America
of the
versus Red Skull.
Yeah, you're fighting that character that they have assumed. And the Executioner is just an executioner. Everyone is a target. Everyone is viable.
Is the executioner a solo job, or is it somebody who's like the middleman? They get the orders. They're like, okay, this super character is no longer safe to be on the board. Go do your job.
They used to be a middleman.
Well, we've got a kind of nebulous background to it all that we've kind of written round and discussed and put up and down a couple of times. The idea, I mean, how spoilery should we be? Because we could talk at length about all this. So how much do you want to know?
Oh, I want to know it all, but that's up to you guys. You still got to sell a book.
Hey, well, the book is worth reading. Is the thing. So I don't have any problem just spoilering everything.
Yeah, let's give some history. Basically, when World War I breaks out, it's not really being fought with more advanced weaponry. It's being fought with superhero type people as they become more prevalent in the world. And at the time, the proto-UN quickly realizes that we need something of a Geneva Convention to deal with all these people. And by the way, what are we going to do when they go completely bananas? Superheroes with PTSD or super criminals who are just going to blow up the world. What do we do with them? And
you put them in sanctuary until Wally West kills them.
What?
You put them in sanctuary until Wally West kills them all.
Oh, right. Yes. Okay. Well, our idea was that they basically set up a private council of some of the more well-known superheroes at the time. It was kind of like in the the Avengers Civil War arc, where you had a registration act, you had people signing up as heroes and so on. But at the time, what wasn't announced publicly was that the UN was setting up a specific division to keep track of all these heroes and villains, and should they become a serious problem, to quietly move them off the board.
Less of a shield, more of a super KGB.
Yeah.
When is a super villain not a problem to be moved off the board?
When they are not behaving outside of certain accepted parameters. If you look at, we're going to take a sidestep to the Venture Brothers. They have a kind of setup there where arching is assigned, where it's almost like performance street art. There's certain rules about it. There's the Guild of Calamitous Intent with all its members who get assigned to do various things. And the way the world has evolved in our setting is slightly similar to that, in that villains are tolerated because they have a tendency to be mad scientists, and they tend to come up with super science. So you kind of let them go out there, do their weird thing, and when they eventually go bananas, you send out the heroes to stop them and then quietly take all their super science away and find more useful applications for it elsewhere. And then eventually they break out and it all starts all over again. So that certainly plays an element to it.
A super bank robber is almost acceptable because he's still a working man punch clock villain. A super terrorist, or even worse, a nation state like Dr. Doom, less so.
Yeah. So it's okay to let the villain hang out there as long as, at some particular point, you're going to get your hands on his, super envelope opener-inator.
Sure. The other element to it, on a more philosophical level, is that the government setups in our society in setting are more authoritarian than ours are. And authoritarian states need enemies in order to maintain power. And villains are very useful in that regard. It's kind of like how in real life, people are like, oh, the terror level has gone up a little bit. Be slightly more afraid today. So you can do the same thing in setting. It's like, oh, look, such and such a villain has broken out of this Supermax jail. We absolutely didn't let him out. Please quietly ignore some political scandal, some company failing, this ridiculous something or other elsewhere, and just focus on him and these wonderful superheroes who are going out to stop him. And please, don't vote us out of office or vote in these crazy people who want to rehabilitate villains and stuff like that. So that plays into it as well.
Well, I mean, you can even go the other direction. You can have the Project Paperclip style. Okay, Dr. Genetics, you're a monster and you do horrible things, but we're willing to give you a work release program with the government if you will please do some of your horrible things to our soldiers to see if we can make super soldiers. Okay, thanks, bye. We'll let you go in 10 years.
Yeah.
So now in the recently finished up Doomsday Clock at DC, there was this thing going on called the Superman theory, wherein it was hypothesized and was actually proven to be true that several of the heroes and villains were the creation of government projects trying to create more metahumans, and that a lot of their fights were staged simply so that people had something to watch and keep their attention focused elsewhere. I, of course, thought Doomsday Clock was a huge wasted opportunity because something of that magnitude should have spilled over into every single book in the DC universe, and Julius Schwartz was rolling in his grave that it didn't. But it sounds like this might be something similar to that, where the government is using the supervillains and using the superheroes, or maybe even creating more of them and having them play act.
Well, certainly, absolutely,
and that's where the plot picks up, in the sense that the previous executioner was getting long in the tooth. He was reaching a point where it's like maybe he's not as functional as he could be anymore, and he doesn't necessarily like the things that we're doing. It's time to retire him with a vengeance, with extreme prejudice. And he was not okay with being retired because even though his job was in many ways what we would deem unethical, he was a patriot serving his country, serving the globe. The job remains. The work is undone. He can't leave it.
Yeah.
So he,
as long as there's a person left standing on this, it could be bad.
Right. So he went underground and now dedicated himself to how do I retool? How do I find the next executioner and do what needs doing? And that's where the story kind of picks up, is he's found that person.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Another big element in our story is we kind of latched onto the Wonder Woman idea, and I was playing a game called Civilization, and in that they had the Spartans as a selectable group, and their leader is named Gorgo, who was a very powerful political figure in ancient Sparta. In fact, Sparta itself had a ridiculously interesting political system and system of balances and whatnot between the warrior class and the people who are ruling at home and all that. And Joe and I got into a discussion. We said, what would it be like if Wonder Woman, instead of being an Athenian, was a Spartan? And we started to iterate on that, and that is where we got our main character, who is the... You see, it's very difficult to say she's a bad person, because she's really just the nemesis of the executioner. Her name is Gorgon. And she's basically a Spartan. And we have this, well, we'll call it a magical island of Spartans who are like, Spartan women who are just all superpowered for some reason, which we're not revealing right now, and acted as a kind of break to the World War I war that was going on, because suddenly they appeared on the scene and everything kind of ground to an immediate halt, because everyone wanted them on their side. They couldn't get them on their side, and the war kind of petered out from there, and they have been existent in setting as the effective replacement for the executioner, acting as kind of elite soldiers to keep the heroes and villains of the world in line with the kind of global government and what they want.
It's not just making fun of Themyscira, by the way.
No.
It was also very much flavored by Wakanda, because it's not that I dislike Black Panther. The movie was fun. But the character, to me, is really dated, comes from an era and a place where the ethos and the concepts that he evokes were very timely, and I don't think he's necessarily aged as well as one might otherwise think. And you have Wakanda, this isolationist, super African nation state that disdains even other Africans. They have the cure for cancer, they won't share it. They have they can cure AIDS, they won't share it. They have a humanist mandate to do good and don't do it because Wakanda first. That is abominable when you're a super future state. So one of our questions was, well, what would ancient Spartans now elevated to modernity look like culturally? How do you explain all of the, frankly, antiquated culturalisms they have retained? How do you explain their lack of social evolution because of the lack of ancient trade and so on? And basically crafting a real politic where this island is not magically unfindable. It's not a domed hidden grove where the perfect super monarch rules. You can go to their island. Take a plane if they don't shoot you down. You can see it by radar or by satellite. It exists. It is known, and they are busily playing the politic game with the UN to retain their freedoms and their identity, as many micronations do against nuclear powers and aggressive neighbors.
So they do play a huge part in this executioner story then.
Yeah, they are we'll call them the reoccurring villains, because I can't think of a better term to describe them. I mean, maybe foil is perhaps the way to describe it. You have the Gorgon, who is the liaison to the UN. You have her team of heroes called the Furare, who are an all-women-led band of warriors who are flying around on these really advanced kind of jet bikes and have superpowered spears and magical, almost seeming shields, and they are sent out to hunt down dangerous criminals and all sorts of nasty sorts that the UN wants quietly put away somewhere.
They are the super cops to the executioner's super criminal.
Yeah, the super SWAT. We'll call them that. Super SWAT.
Yeah.
I like that.
Our prologue effectively opens with them being sent to hunt down a criminal called Benjamin Time. And just as they find him, well, the executioner also finds him. And as, plans do, their plan to capture him, take him away, and study him quietly runs headfirst into the executioner's plan of simply killing him. And then suddenly they're like, okay, who is this person we're fighting, and why are we getting our heads shoved in? And the Gorgon is quietly freaking out because that's the executioner who they haven't seen for 90 years, and what's going on here? And that is what we want to set up with our prologue that will lead into our first book, which we want to work on next. So yeah, that's kind of where it is at story-wise. I mean, I recognize we've gone in a kind of rambling path to get here for the last 40 minutes. So,
the rambles are the best.
Good.
I love the rambling talks.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like Zorro. If you actually read the Zorro fiction, you have Zorro, and Zorro's doing Zorro things, and that's great. But much of the story is actually about Zorro's antagonists and their struggles to find Zorro, and we have to catch plots to capture Zorro. Not a beat that Batman misses, but a beat that doesn't always crop up because Batman is often dealing with supervillains doing supercrime. It's not always that the cops are actually hunting the Dark Knight, and the Dark Knight is, at odds because Commissioner Gordon, his friend, is no longer looking the other way. The executioner is solidly, he's on the national watch list. There's a reward for information leading to the capture of the executioner. They want him.
So how close is the executioner to being a fait accompli, to where people can start, crowdfunding it?
Well, let's see. We have the prologue put together. We are currently hiring in an artist to add in an extra 2 pages at the start, just to give a little bit more clarity to the setting, because we've had feedback from people saying, this is interesting, but we kind of need to know a bit more about what's going on just to kind of figure out where everything is set. So it's like, okay, we've got those pages coming in. And then we're just going to revise the initial prologue a little bit to add in a little bit more detail in the background, add in some sound effects, fix up a few things with dialogue bubbles and all that sort of stuff. And beyond that, we have roughs in the work for the next 4 books, I think. And effectively what we're going to do is we're going to put the prologue out there. We are going to say, look, folks, this is what we've got. This is what we have planned. This is how much it will cost. Are you going to join us in putting it together? And hopefully, if we can get sufficient funding put together on a Kickstarter or something, we can then go into full development on it. I mean, come hell or high water, I am going to get the roughs done for all 4 books. and have those at least to put out there on Twitter every few days to show folks, hey, look, this is what we're doing today, you know? But whether it will stay in rough format, whether it will get upgraded to proper line art, whether it will become a fully colored thing, will be totally down to whether or not people are willing to kickstart it or to Indiegogo it or whatnot.
And I am equally dedicated to this project. When I was a little guy, I wanted to draw comics. I wanted to be the guy that does the pencils. I wanted that awesome job because I grew up looking at my dad's old 70s and 80s era, classic Secret Wars era comics, and then reading 80s era comics when I was a tween, and then of course now I read 90s era Predator, Dark Horse, and that sort of thing, and then now I'm reading the good stuff. But solidly, I really wanted to do that thing. I did not have the raw talent. I practiced very, very hard all the time and just reached a plateau, could not get there, right? But writing I'm good at. Writing I care about. And when I sit down to write the script, it flows like water. It is so much fun. It is so amazing to do what you love and to know that it's going to come together in a visual format that everyone can see and hold and be like, so I want to see it. I want to see it done.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to squash your dreams now. I hate that, but as an author myself, I have to do it. No, when you talk about how much you love writing, it reminds me of the possibly apocryphal tale of Raymond Carver having a fan go up to him and say, "Oh, you're a writer too, and I love your stuff, and I love writing. I sit down and I write every day, and I just have so much fun." And he just looks at us and says, "Then you're not doing it right."
No. As much as I'm like, oh, I love it. No. I also know the pain. I absolutely sit at the computer and sweat blood. I do know it.
I show up and I go, Joe, where is my writing? Where is my script? And Joe just says, I will get the knee pads.
It is at that point that the troll climbs under the desk and begins to, eat the runoff yet again.
Yeah, or even worse, I'll come up to him and say, yeah, this is really nice, but it doesn't work. Do it again. And then screaming happens.
Well,
points to the screen, says, look, there it is. Page 1, panel 1. Yes, but that's all it says.
Well, in part, as I have had this problem when people have brought me their fiction and be like, look at this, isn't it great? And I've tried to be very nice and be like, look, this is great. This is really good. This could be better. You need to go back to formula, please. Don't give up. Don't give up. Make these edits. You could go places. And they're like, oh. And then they like quit.
Rewrite?
Yeah, and then they like quit. And then I'm left to feel like I'm responsible for killing their dreams.
Well, you are.
Shut up.
Hey, if they don't come back, it was a mercy killing.
There you go.
But I tell people, no matter how much you love your idea, it's probably not original, and just accept your baby's not pretty. Someone's gonna look at your baby and say it's ugly. The sooner you are okay with that, the better off you'll be. So I'm okay with the idea that the baby's ugly, but I really want to see it live to term.
Yeah, great job, Joe.
I want to see it graduate the publishing college.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm kind of cognizant of the fact that we've kind of dominated the conversation here. Is there any questions that you've got for us that we might have skipped over in our rambles?
Oh, I'm going to get to them. I definitely
am.
Good. But since we are talking about publishing, I'm going to do the old commercial break.
Great.
Thing. We're going to shill a little bit. Just want to remind everybody that criticalblast.com is, of course, a website. And if you'd like to help out our YouTube channel and you're wanting to send us some of those pretty super chats, you'll notice you cannot do that because we don't have them. We do encourage you, of course, to come visit criticalblast.com for all our news and reviews and content. And just being there, somebody will pay us a shekel or two because you passed through. And we do appreciate that. We have also branched out into publishing. Our first urban fantasy anthology, Gods and Services, is available on Amazon. And that is a collection of short stories from authors from around the world, some of them well-known, some of them first-timers, featuring that little pop-up shop that you've all heard about that is never there when you try to go back and desperately return the thing you bought. In Gods and Services, it happens to be a trinket or an artifact that has a god attached to it who is then bound by the worship you have given the object to make your life better, whether you wish it to be or not. Following that, we have released our first hardcover YA superhero novel, not a graphic novel, a book with like words. Bulletproof Origins by Stephen J. Mitchell. Young Cody Haywood has turned 16 in this book, and he wakes up that day to find out that he is suddenly impervious to any physical harm. Unfortunately for Cody, he has the attention span of a ferret on pixie sticks, and it's hard for him to focus on how to become the superhero that he now wants to be. It also doesn't help that there's a team of terrorists who know that he's bulletproof and would really like to kill him so they can find out the secret for themselves. Both of these are available on Amazon. Links are in the description, right underneath the link to archetypecomics.com, where we would love you to go visit and see the artwork and production of these fine gentlemen so that you can get a taste of what's going to be coming your way in a crowdfunded format very soon. Now,
in terms of launching a crowdfunding thing, by the way, we have a sign up at the moment for MailChimp where we are harvesting emails. Basically, if you come to our site, enter in your email and say, hey, I'm interested. Once we get enough of those in place that we can say, okay, there's enough people here expressing interest, then we'll start the Kickstarter and begin pushing out that sort of thing. Because our previous experience with it is if you just launch it without that initial sign-up, you won't really get the traction needed to get the project rolling and get the interest going, you know? So that would be our main thing.
Have a lot of pre-talk.
Yeah. But yes, you were about to say.
I was about to say, we've been talking about the Executioner all this time. And of course, when we started talking, I was talking to somebody on this little project called Bear and Bun. And I have no idea what Bear and Bun is. I put those two words together, I get a picture that we can't talk about in front of children. But
you can talk about Bear and Bun in front of children. That is myself and Riff, our main artist. We use that account under a different name just to keep everything nice and safe, because we do post adult content there, and we don't. I personally have no issue with adult content. I live in Europe. Our comics here regularly feature nudity alongside violence, so we don't mind that sort of stuff over here. But I do respect the fact that there are people out there who, for some strange reason, much prefer to see someone's brains being splattered over a wall than someone topless. So, you know, that's fine.
I can't get that myself either, but, you know.
Yeah, but the point is that Bear and Bun is basically me and Riff getting commissions so that he can basically live. The country he lives in, unemployment is reasonably high. So we have basically turned to the internet to get work from clients. And we have been very fortunate to build up a very dedicated fan base who continually surprise me with their generosity. And we use our Twitter just to communicate with folks, to post our work as it's completed. And I occasionally ramble at people about comics and complain about things. And that's how I accidentally fell into this again. I contacted Joe and I was like, hey, Joe, I posted something on Twitter and I may have done something. And now we have an interview.
You got a reaction. Well, you definitely got a reaction. So Riff, now he's the gentleman we talked about, I think before we even started the show, who could not do some of these commissions because of the religious holiday.
Yeah, he is a wonderful person. We are unofficial brothers at this point. We started out as just friends, but we have become very close. He is a amazingly talented artist who is only undermined by some mental health issues that he has, which I think everyone has if they're an artist. It seems to be a running trait. And we work together, and I do my best to make sure that he gets enough money. Chris, hello. Yes, gotta feed the bun. We basically work to make sure that he's got enough money coming in month to month to keep things rolling, and I get just a little bit from that that's enough to either fund advertising or do a little exploratory work in doing comics and stuff like that. For example, Riff is currently doing rough work for the Executioner, effectively for free, whilst I give him pretty much all the money that comes in for the commission work. So it kind of works out for us that way, So that's what Bear and Bun is all about. And we are linked in with all sorts of weird communities. And I know there was a very nice chap I was speaking to. His name was Liam, and I forget his last name, but he is something of a writer, and he was very much pushing that I should establish a separate profile for Archetype Comics and to keep all the weirdness to one side. And I agree with it in the sense that I am not trying to hide anything, but I am trying to separate things out so that people who come for one thing aren't suddenly bombarded with something else entirely that they have no interest in. So I believe in people's right to choose what they're exposed to. Their own Lovecraftian nightmares.
See, while I concur in principle, because I want Archetype Comics to largely be for capes, because we love capes, at the same time, I always just, as much as I love the big two, I always compared our goal, like if we could make it, right, to be like heavy metal, or for older readers who are in the same vein of crazy gothic black and white 90s awfulness that I'm into. Dread of Night by London Night Studios, Danzig's imprint while it was around, or Gore Shriek. If you've ever seen those old horror comics, just
oh yeah,
like, is it lurid? Is it violent? Is it awful? Yes. Is it authentic? Yeah. Okay, that works for me. I'm down with that.
I go back to Tim Mitchell's Faust.
Oh yeah, no, Faust and Demon Cop.
Yeah. So it's fair to say then that for Archetype Comics right now, the Executioner is the comic book. I mean, which is fine. A lot of the indie people out there are working on their one title and laying stake with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any thoughts about once the Executioner's arc is done, moving into other characters, and would they even come out of the Executioner's universe?
Well, the plan has always been. I mean, we have two comics that we work on. We have the Executioner, which is our main focus right now, and we have Mars Project, which is another thing that we were very interested in. I would very much like to get back to Mars Project at some point. It is definitely more of a tits, guns, and violence style thing than...
Now we're talking.
Yeah. than the Executioner is. Executioner is a little bit more grim grounded, whereas Mars Project was more fantasy sci-fi kind of thing. Fantasy in the sense that there was fantastical stuff going on, not that there was people slinging spells about. So yeah, those are our two things. Right now, we've got the Executioner, we've got the prologue, we've got the 4 books that will make up the kind of arc that we have planned. And from there, it's a case of, okay, we want to launch other stuff in the universes we've made. We want to make them into fleshed out worlds that people can dip into and have a general understanding of the setting, and then follow whatever character they're really interested in. I mean, we've had a couple of ideas for crowdfunding, such that people could make their own heroes to appear in comics, and their own background characters that might be repeat characters, things like that. So it's open to creating new stuff, and we've even floated the idea of reaching out to other creatives and inviting them to come and play in our playground, being like, okay, here's the setting, have fun, and make something interesting in our setting, So
Sure.
In matter of point, when this interview was mentioned and some of the potential subject matters, I started trying to think, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? Oh God, I'm not the most I've taken courses, but that's different than actually doing the public speaking, and you have to represent the company. Oh God, what do you talk about? And instead of being panicked, my brain was like, okay, if we were going to have more titles and ideas, what would we do? And I just started throwing together ideas, and I've got 7 or 8 of them on a back burner that have only the barest, structure of a concept of a thing that could be a thing. And all of them sound awesome to me.
Well, they would, wouldn't they? They're your ideas.
I know, right?
My ideas sound great to me too, and one day we will be able to present them to people, and they can tell us exactly how stupid they are. But
exactly,
one of them might be good enough that we can develop it into yes another line, and that would be the hope, that we can continue to supply interesting stuff for people to get at a reasonable price point. We're very lucky. I recently discovered, last year I should say, that because I'm in Ireland, we have 0% tax on printing and selling books here, provided it's actually by an Irish group. So I was chatting with a local printing company, and they were telling me the costs that I would have to pay to print out one of our books, and it was very, very reasonable, even using very high quality paper and stuff like that. So we definitely have access to the infrastructure to get this all done as well. So that's another plus for us.
It's definitely going to make it easier. What kind of a size are we talking about as far as, we're talking about standard 22-page comic, something a little bit larger, like a 40-page graphic novel?
Well, the idea is that each issue, I think the prologue is about 22 pages. No, it's about 24 now. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, I think the books themselves are going to be about the 30-ish page mark, weren't they? 30, 40 pages?
Just about, somewhere in that range.
Okay, sorry, you.
In the realm of how to write the scripts, I have always kind of leaned heavily on the fake it till you make it, where it's sure, I could make 100-page comic, but that doesn't mean it's good, and that doesn't mean that it's structured well. So I try to replicate industry standard as practice, so yeah, we're about 20 to 30 per book. I want to say 30 because in the end, when they're all put together, they'll be graphic novel size if you wanted them as a trade paperback.
Yeah, the idea was that if we could get all 4 of them done, we could take them with the prologue, jam it all into one hardback we could sell for however much, and it would be roughly 200-ish pages total.
That's a good size.
Just like the books we read, where it always has that production back where you've got the multiple covers and glossy.
Yep.
Very, very good. Well, the important thing is to get the first book successful, because if that's successful, the rest of it's going to follow. Speaking from experience, I mentioned we did the Gods and Services anthology, and we were, that was our first book. We put out the call for writers, and we put out, what the modest token payment was going to be, along with copies of the book. But it did pay cash, and we had maybe 30 submissions to it, of which we picked 10. 3 or more of them I knew we were going to publish before they even came in, because they came from authors that I had come into contact with through the Critical Blast site doing book reviews. So we had Ira Bloom, who's been published by Scholastic with Hearts and Other Body Parts. We had David Peterson, who's done the 5-novel Angst series. John Delarose has a story in there. So I knew we were going to have people. But then we actually published, and we actually paid. And when we put the anthology, which we're reading through till the end of April, called The Devil You Know, I've got over 100 submissions in this thing so far, and they're all quality, and they all have pedigrees behind these author names that, 10 or 15 more things. So it got easier, but it's also going to be a lot harder because I've got a lot more work to do now. But yeah, you get the first book out there and people know that you're delivering and that you're putting out a product, they're more likely going to be willing to fund the second and third and follow-ups.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I can tell you off the top of my head, we were thinking of crowdsourcing it for roughly 2,500 to 3,000, thereabouts, and that would just cover the costs of getting it drawn up, printed, and then there'd be shipping and handling on top to go to wherever in the world it would be going. So we do have a rough target in mind. Yeah, it would be US dollars we'd be talking. I mean, I normally work in euros over here, but our artists all insist in payment in US dollars, so that's roughly what it would be, I think. So yeah,
PayPal converts.
It does, but it makes accounting a nightmare for us over here because the currency rate changes every damn day. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we think it's a reasonably modest target. So we'll see if we can get it there. Hopefully we can.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing the launch. Hopefully that's going to come. What would you estimate? Like a month, 2 months? Or is that even too long out? Or
I think 2 months would probably be a good number for us. Our main artist, Nick, who is doing the line art for the comic, is currently teaching at the moment. So we're kind of working around his schedule more than anything else. So we have to be very careful not to interfere with his day-to-day work. But yeah, I think 2 months out is probably what we're going to aim for at this point. I sent out a little email yesterday to the folks, and I think by the middle of March, March, we should have all the revisions in place to the prologue, so we can start distributing that to folks as an example of what they can expect for the first proper book, and so on.
All right. Do you have a preference over Kickstarter or Indiegogo, or some people are doing both?
Well, I'm in a funny position. Indiegogo won't accept my government-issued ID, so I'm probably going to have to go to Kickstarter, or maybe
Ireland. That's not a real place.
Well, they'll accept a passport, but I don't have a passport because I am a British citizen who has lived in Ireland his entire life, and then Brexit happened, and then we're straying into politics. But suffice to say, I don't have a passport. I only have my Irish stuff, and they won't accept my Irish stuff. So I need to get naturalized as an Irish citizen, get an Irish passport, and then hit Indiegogo over the head with that. And unfortunately, that could actually take quite a bit of time. So we're really going to have to investigate which platform we can use that won't muck us about with IDs and identification and verification too much. So we'll see what happens.
Don't feel bad, Nicholas. I'm blue collar in America. I'm barely a person.
Yeah, you're not a corporation like a real person. Sorry.
Exactly.
That went horribly political. I'm sorry. Well, no, I'm not.
Whatever makes people talk,
Oh, yeah.
All right, so clock is ticking. 2 months out, we've committed.
Yeah.
We'll all be looking for it.
Yeah, we will probably be back here to annoy your fan base and you, and probably hijack your show again.
I would love that. Yeah, I'll just put the headphones down and pretend like I got my mic disconnected and let you guys just run with it. But yeah, you guys do need a YouTube channel. Apparently everybody who's putting out a book, they've got to get on the YouTube channel and talk about it a couple of times a week.
Apparently they do. Certainly once we swing into production, we'll start doing that, I think. I've got another contact who does music composition. So I'm probably going to snag him to help us, get us a little intro or something and throw it all together. So, we'll have our 80s-inspired intro music or something to go with this.
Now, if we could find
Fantastic.
someone who was interested in doing an animation and could just like do a
Oh god,
90s X-Men style opening.
I've got animators. The problem is they charge $20 a second.
I've got a guy.
Yeah.
I've got a guy.
Oh, you've got a guy.
I've got a guy. He's he's just putting up his own website. He's my wife's cousin.
Oh yeah, this is how it goes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Nothing
Yeah.
like a little nepotism. But no, he's putting up a site called Obscured Cartoons, and it's going to just feature his artwork and his animation. He's going to try to, get that out there for people to see and, get gigs through that. So I told him, let me know when you actually put something on the website other than the skeleton. But yeah, hit Zach Daly up, Obscured Cartoons. Maybe his style might be something that you like. It's a bit cartoony. It might not fit the executioner, but it's animation.
I mean,
And now,
It's Archetype.
and now he owes me $20.
There you go. Excellent.
well, I mean, same token. Now that I know it exists, I am totally going to come sniffing around like the hungry dog that I am. When you guys have submissions open for whatever your next thing is,
We're still reading through the end of April.
right? And I understand if I send you something and you just quietly put it on fire and throw it in my face. It's okay. I've lived with disappointment before.
Yeah. He's used to the
Well,
suffering.
I'll tell you what, I wish I had the letter that I got from Weird Tales for my short story Nicolas Cage, which had an apostrophe in it and was all about Santa Claus enduring eternal punishment as the patron saint of pedophiles.
Oh god.
No. I mean, yes, but
And Weird
no.
Tales came back. Yeah, Weird Tales came back, and the opening paragraph I'll never forget is like, while we occasionally publish the story in bad taste. I was like, oh, this crossed a line, didn't it?
In interesting matter of point, I also submitted to Weird Tales at some point in the past because I'm a huge Robert E. Howard fan. I've read Doc Savage and all the old pulps, and I was like, yes, Weird Tales, they're printing, woo! And then I sent, and they're like, yes, this is quite antiquated, very much in the old style. We don't really do this anymore. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm surprised any magazine stays in business now because everybody just publishes their own thing. If you want, you just go to Amazon and say, hey, give me an ISBN number, slap this out, and I'm going to get my family members to buy it and tell me how great I am.
Well,
and then I'll call myself an author.
Well, purely on the writing side of things, the struggle has been actually that if they're not self-publishing, which is fine. I mean, anyone who can make it, I'm for you, man. But if they're not self-publishing, all the venues that once were paying venues are either closed, they'll come to you, you don't go to them. Or
Exactly.
That's out of it. Or they're like, do you want exposure? Because we're non-paying. And it's like, I have to eat.
Do you follow that Twitter account for exposure?
No, but I've probably seen it once or twice. We've
that's
had
great.
interesting run-ins with people wanting stuff for exposure.
Well,
And I've had to politely remind them that that's something you die from.
We've conquered the world again.
The
It's ours.
world is ours. All right, everyone. So it's archetypecomics.com. Archetype-comics.com. There should be a link below this video, hopefully, and you can go to our site. You can look at the preview comic that's up there right now. There is a sign-up link that you can view to sign up to our stuff. And oh god, he's back again.
Chilling intensifies.
Yeah.
I hear you again.
Yay!
Yay!
We just took the opportunity to shill. Yes.
Yes. You dropped out for a moment, and we decided to hijack your stream again.
Maximum shill.
Just do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, my first book was published out of England, Alice's Journey Beyond the Moon, Telos Publishing, and I still get a little bit every year, and it's in euros and it converts to dollars, and I get that whole accounting nightmare thing you were talking about.
Oh yeah.
Let me give you the.
Funnily,
No,
Go ahead.
you go first.
I was gonna say, let me give you the pet the dog moment, where everyone feels sorry for me. But I fit so many of the like special interest group bingo points. Because here I am, starving artist in the sense that I am an author and I want to get published for and paid for that. And it's like, well, why don't you get another job, Joe? It's like, I'm a disabled person. I have the cerebral palsy. It's like, okay, well, why don't you get a job that can work for you? It's like, my mom is a disabled person. She's got the beatus and has lost both legs. So I'm now working as her caregiver full time when I'm not working on this. I am so busy doing things that do not meet writing that when I'm doing the writing, it's like, no, I gotta get paid. I gotta get paid for this. The entire idea that you can just give exposure is a fallacy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
it lends focus.
Well, tonight is all about exposure.
Oh, yes.
That's all I'm doing is exposing
Yes,
our
but it's
brand.
costing us
There's no
anything.
super chat.
So,
And we're not going to go to jail for it.
that too.
Well, that's a totally different kind of exposure.
Is it though?
Oh. I'm sorry. I have for some reason a 12-year-old boy has just run into the room and decided to do what might be performance dance. I'm not quite sure.
Oh, God.
I mean, I consistently tell people that I'm 12 because I
He's
have a
a
horrible
child. He's supposed to be in bed. Well, it's funny because he
Hmm?
I mean, we work in the
he
comics
wants to be
industry.
this or he wants to be that.
Children.
Yes. Well, I've been told most raising 2 children in the house, and I'm one of them. And he'll tell me what he wants to be this, he wants to be that. I'm like, well, I'm 52, and when you're 52, you know what you want to be. And it's like, well, I said, you want to be 12. So you've already reached peak. Just enjoy where you're at right now, because it only gets worse from here.
Oh, great.
All right. Well, I've kept you guys on long enough, I'm sure. And like you said, you are going to be back so that we can talk about the Executioner when it's getting ready to kick off crowdfunding. I would love to assist in having that thing collect some dollars and become an actual physical item people can hold.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, we will keep in
definitely
contact
hit me back
with
up
you on Twitter and keep track of what's happening with your show and whatnot. And hopefully we can come back on and be like, hey, look at this awesome thing that we are doing, and please give us more money. And hopefully it will just grow from there.
We are the worst combination of hobo and nerd. You will never get rid of us.
That's not a problem. Hopefully by the next time I'll actually have a computer that won't cut out on me and something like an internet feed. So,
Yeah.
But, as long as you guys can run the show while I'm gone, I'm good with it. We can
there we
take
go.
over.
There we go.
All
right.
Nicholas, Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with both of you.
Hey, Nicholas, we were talking about starting a podcast. We'll just inherit.
There you go. 2 hours.
Why buy when you can steal?
Exactly. All right. Yes, it has been.
And on that note,
so thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
It was a pleasure, Mr. Carter.